What up, book lovers? It is G-Swiss here, and I'm here today to do a huge clean out. I'm unhauling 80 books. So while my mother-in-law was staying here, I couldn't really use this room as a living room or really as a filming room as often within the 2-month period. So I wasn't really around my books a lot. And I reckon that very much helped in terms of the unhauling / spring cleaning process. Because if I was to just view my bookshelves non-stop, I feel like some of these books I would still have some sort of attachment to, and it would be much harder to get rid of them. However, personally, I find that my mother-in-law staying in this room, while I did want to film and while I did really want to be around my books, it helped me for the better when it came to deciding what books to get rid of after distancing myself from majority of them for 2 months. Because within the 2-month period, I would think about what books I would actually like to read without really visualizing my bookshelves majority of the time. From the top of my head, I knew exactly what books I would want to keep and what books I decided that I needed to let go of. Which explains why there are 80 books that I'm planning to get rid of today. So before I get into the unhaul, I do want to say a couple of things. First of all, if I unhaul your favorite book, it's nothing personal. 1, I'm trying to save shelf space, and 2, I'm either not interested or I did read the book and it just wasn't my thing. And secondly, these books aren't a free-for-all. I will be offering them to my friends IRL because I would prefer not to go to the post office. I do work full-time and I have no time to go to the post office to post these out. But just like previously, any of the books that my friends aren't taking, I will be donating. I guess without further ado, I want to get straight into this unhaul because we have a lot of books to talk about. The first 2 books I pick up from my unhaul pile are volumes 1 and 2 of My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom. I'm pretty sure that the title of the series spoils where it's going to go. I enjoyed the first volume, but when I think about it, it felt very similar to every other isekai that I had watched previously via anime. I don't know whether or not I want to get into isekai manga. Also, these volumes were really expensive because they're published by 7 Seas, and I don't know if there's Australian distribution for 7 Seas here. Each of the volumes were like $24. Personally, I don't want to have to pay $24 per volume of my manga, and I'm not motivated enough to continue buying volumes of the series. And this is not me personally saying I don't like isekai. I really love ReZero, but unfortunately the manga volumes aren't as accessible, and yeah, it's really difficult to purchase some of the former volumes of the series, and there are just too many at this point. But with some other pricey isekai manga series, I would just prefer not to continue on with them because I don't know whether it's going to be worth it in the end. I don't know whether the series has finished yet. Maybe I should look back at when the series is finished and look at the overall reviews. For now, I am going to be unhauling these because I'm not going to read them anytime soon. The next book on my unhaul pile is not a book that I'm personally unhauling. Camilo is, and it is Her Majesty's Swarm Volume 1. I assume that he's also getting rid of this for similar reasons why I'm getting rid of My Next Life as a Villainess. So yeah, I don't really have much to say here. This isn't me unhauling it. And the next few books I have on my unhaul pile is the Arc of the Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman. The only reason why I'm getting rid of these is because I have the Illumicrate editions now, and I've personally been debating as to whether or not I should get rid of these because I do want Camilo to read the series, but if he wants to read it, he will probably listen to it on an audiobook. And from our previous discussions, he's not really keen on picking up these paperbacks. So I just ended up deciding I'm just gonna get rid of them and give them to someone else who is going to appreciate the series because it's a really good series. This kind of pains me to get rid of, but I don't know if I'm immediately interested in continuing on with the series. I want to see reviews for book 3 before deciding whether or not to continue on with the series. But as much as I appreciate Tomi Adeyemi, they are taking their precious time with the series. Therefore, I am no longer really motivated to continue on with the Children of Blood and Bone series or the Legacy of Orisha. Legacy of Orisha was meant to be a trilogy. It had been announced that this book is getting extended to like a 7-book series. I don't know if that source was correct or not. The thing is, Children of Virtue and Vengeance came out at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020, and I only remember because this was the time that I had moved out of home before I moved in with Camilo. This was before Camilo and I were married. We've almost been married for 3 years now. It's ridiculous. So it has been 3 years since this book came out, and it has probably been 5 years since Children of Blood and Bone came out. I loved this book when I first read it, and when I read the sequel, I was disappointed in the direction of the story. story. I was disappointed with how Nan was did. I felt like he would have been redeemed and he just was not. I'm really upset about this because I thought that the Legacy of Orisha series based on Children of Blood and Bone was going to be my favorite series of all time because this book was excellent. But unfortunately, that was not the case. I don't feel motivated enough to continue on after the direction of the second book. And like, look, I do want to read books from Tomi Adeyemi and I do want to support them going forward. It's just at the moment, it's really hard to do that when you just didn't really like the sequel and it's been 3 years since there has been a book in the series. I want to see how book 3 goes. And look, if I really love this series, I will consider purchasing much nicer editions of it. At the moment, I'm not really motivated. I'm sorry. And the next books I pick up for my Unhaul pile are some books that I put on my self-destructing TBR. Overworld Trilogy by Jason Segel and Kirsten Miller. I never got around to these and I never was motivated to read these. And so it has been a year. They have been on my self-destructing TBR and I've just decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to get rid of them because I'm just not motivated to read them whatsoever. I mean, this premise sounded promising to me at some point. It just doesn't seem promising to me anymore. I think after being burnt out on Ready Player One, after the movie came out and the movie kind of disappointed me, I'm just not interested in those kind of stories anymore. At the moment, there might be a book series that will change my mind eventually. At the moment, I'm just not really interested in Overworld, unfortunately. And the next book I'm unhauling is an Anne Bronte novel that I purchased for $5. I just personally really loved the way that the tenet of Wildfell Hall looked in this edition. I mean, it just looks absolutely stunning. I'm obsessed with this edition, but I have never really brought myself to read it, and I'm not really interested in it. I reckon I can give this to someone who loves the Bronte sisters instead. And I mean, never say never with the Bronte sisters. I still have yet to read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I still have that on my TBR after all these years, and I refuse to get rid of it because I really want to read it. It just has influenced so many books that I've actually read. But this book I have never really heard of before, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Revisiting my self-destructing TBR, I also have Ash Princess and Lady Smoke. I'm just personally not motivated to read this series because I barely hear things about it these days. I also really don't like these covers that much. I mean, like, Lady Smoke's cover is okay. I've mentioned this on my channel once before. I will mention it again. They just look like a replica of Red Queen to me personally. Look, if some sort of book box like Fairy Loot or Illumicrate decide to revisit the series and make special editions, maybe I will consider it. It's just at the moment I'm not motivated to read it. And if one day I am motivated to read the series, I will probably listen to them on audiobook. I'm just not motivated to collect them in these paperbacks. This next one absolutely pains me to get rid of because when I read it, I absolutely loved it. And I personally absolutely adore this character. I've been a fan of them since I've read this book and I've read them in the comics. And they star in my favorite movie of all time. Yes, guys, I'm referring to Miles Morales, and the book I'm getting rid of is Miles Morales Spider-Man by Jason Reynolds. I appreciated this young adult story, but I don't think I'm going to revisit it. At the moment, I just want to keep Into the Spider-Verse a little bit more prominent in my mind when I think about Miles Morales' story. I did enjoy the story though, and I did love following the characters in this book in particular, but it's not the same from what I've read in the comics and the Into the Spider-Verse movie or the franchise. This one devastates me to get rid of as well, but it's the 100 by Cass Morgan. This is a signed copy as well, but I just don't see myself reading it. It was lovely meeting Cass Morgan, but unfortunately nothing else by Cass Morgan was out at the time. And so now when I think about it, if I had a copy of The Ravens at the time that I met her, I would have gotten that book signed by her and I would have read that book because I'm very much more interested in her newer works than the 100. And also, as much as I did enjoy the 100 TV show at the time that I watched it, I only watched 2 seasons, by the way. I could not continue on with the TV show. It just was a bit difficult for me. That's probably for the better because that season finale that I heard about was absolutely ridiculous. I'm just not motivated to read anything with the 100 premise. I don't really want to think about the 100. I think just knowing how the TV show ended and also how vivid the first 2 seasons are in my mind, it's very much going to taint my reading experience of the book series. So I've just decided that I am not going to read it. Oh my goodness, there's another book I'm getting rid of by a Bronte sister. Jane Eyre. I keep on telling myself I'm gonna read this, but I really don't know if I ever am. I purchased this edition from an op shop for like $5 and it's so pretty. It's just collecting dust on my bookshelves though, so I don't see the point in keeping it if I'm just never really gonna read it. And then I have 4 Dead Queens by Astrid Schult. I don't think I'm gonna reread this one. I actually really enjoyed this book. I just don't think I'm going to reread it, so I'm planning to give it away to someone who would want to read it. But I do want to read another book by Astrid Schult eventually because 4 Dead Queens was great. I'm just never gonna revisit this, but the cover is stunning. This series series also pains me to get rid of, but I'm going to be getting rid of the first 2 books in the Diabolic series by S.J. Kincaid. So this book never ended up getting published in the 3rd book in trade paperback here in Australia, and I think that has to do with the fact that the 3rd book took like 2 or 3 years to come out. But I remember when the Diabolic first was announced, the publisher was pushing this book so hard onto young adult readers, saying that it was the next best thing, that it was going to be like the new Hunger Games or Divergent or like anything sci-fi like. The Diabolic was going to be the new phenomenon. And the wild thing about that is the fact that the Diabolic, I believe, did not perform as well as those major series that it was essentially being comped to, which is kind of devastating. I'm not saying that I'm not interested in the series whatsoever, because I actually kind of am. It's just the format of the 3rd book will not match the rest of the books from what I know, and I've held on to these for a while, probably around 4 years. The 3rd book only recently came out, and even then, like, it was a very silent release. It actually kind of devastates me because I thought that the series was indeed going to blow up, and I do want to give S.J. Kincaid a chance. It's just, I probably want to get this series in matching editions, or probably just listen to them on audiobook before making a decision as to whether or not I should actually have editions of these books on my shelves to begin with. I felt very conflicted about this for a very long time, but these editions have just been collecting dust for years. I'm not disinterested. However, I don't think I can get like a full matching set of the series. I might try it out maybe sometime in the later future. And speaking of delayed sequels, The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. I've heard nothing about the other 2 books that are coming in the series. Once again, this devastates me because I am so looking forward to a full series, but I mean, I don't know if anything is confirmed. Maybe something was confirmed sometime after I'm filming this video right now, but as I'm filming this video, nothing has been confirmed for the series, and I'm a little bit devastated about this one as well because I was so looking forward to getting into a new series. And also, this cover is absolutely beautiful. I love the foiling. I don't know whether this series is going to continue. What I do know is that I received this paperback when I was still living with my parents with Camilo. It has been over 2 years since this book came out, and there's still no sequel announcement. There's a sequel listed on GOODREADS, but there's no confirmation as to when that's coming out. And personally, I don't want to dunk on slower writers because I do understand that it is not always realistic to have another writing project out a year after the first one. It's just if the author and a publisher is going to hype up a series saying that it's the next best thing, but there isn't a follow-up within a reasonable time frame to keep the audience interested, we do lose interest. Fortunately, that is the case with a few of these series on this list. And again, that's another reason why I unhaul, because I lose interest in these series because I'm promised that a sequel will come out when nothing has been announced. And that has happened more often within the recent years, and I'm kind of getting tired of it. And the next book I'm planning to unhaul is The Roughest Draft. This book, I was told, was better than Beach Read. And I read this book before Beach Read thinking that I would have like a better experience, and I also wanted to compare the 2. And I have to say, whoever said that had a really bad hot take because this was not better than Beach Read whatsoever, and it doesn't even come close. It really does not feel fleshed out. It feels very rushed, and the main 2 characters did not have as much chemistry as I wanted them to. It was just an okay read to pass time, but it wasn't great, and I really wish it slapped harder. The next book I plan to unhaul is actually a book that I have on my February TBR. However, I'm getting rid of this copy because it is the US paperback and it doesn't match the rest of my paperbacks in height. That, my friends, is No Words by Meg Cabot. I'm getting rid of this one because it just does not fit on my bookshelves with the rest of the book, but it's a pretty cover though. And the next book I plan to unhaul is The Near Witch by Victoria Schwab, or V.E. Schwab. This, I believe, is Victoria Schwab's debut novel, and I wanted to read it at some point, but I just keep hearing that it's not that good. If anything, at the moment, the reviews are a little bit intimidating for me, personally. I don't know if I have seen any booktuber or book reviewer that I trust give this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and I've kept it on my shelf for years because I thought I needed to collect everything from one of my favorite authors of all time in order to pretty much call them a fave. But I mean, I got rid of the Monsters of Verity duology, so I'm getting rid of The Near Witch. At this point, I am also considering getting rid of Gallant, but I mean, I'm gonna see. I did read that one. I didn't really enjoy it as much. I've just noticed that with Victoria Schwab's books, I prefer her adult works over her children's or young adult works. And I'm pretty sure that The Near Witch was written to be YA. And the next stack of books I plan to unhaul are all these outdated Colleen Hoover editions. I just don't like these covers. I was actually given all of these secondhand. No loss on my wallet, actually. So I'm just gonna be handing these over to those who want to collect old editions of Colleen Hoover's novels. If I want to read these books, I will probably purchase them in their new paperbacks because the designs of their new paperbacks are absolutely stunning compared to these. because I just don't like looking at these on my shelves because I just don't like how tacky they are. But those aren't the only coho novels that I am unhauling today. I am going to be unhauling my copy of Without Merit. This does not have an updated cover. This is like the most up-to-date cover. I just don't like this book, so I'm getting rid of it. Then It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. It Ends With Us, I have a trade paperback edition of. That is a collector's edition with a much prettier color. That edition matches my It Starts With Us copy in height. So I am planning to get rid of this one because I just don't need it anymore. And also, once again, the collector's edition has a much prettier color anyway, so this one I'm not sad about unhauling. And the next book I am planning to unhaul is actually a book I received for like a PR package I got sent probably 4 or 5 years ago. And that, my friends, is The Crowns of Crossworld by D.E. Knight. I believe that this is a middle grade. I really loved the cover and I never really wanted to get rid of it because of its cover. I will pick up middle grade every once in a while, but I mean, this has been sitting on my shelves collecting dust for years and I don't see myself reading it anytime soon. But a book series that I absolutely do love, that I do want to also pass on because I now have the hardbacks of the series because it is one of my favorite series of all time. And my friends, is the Malediction trilogy by Danielle L. Jensen. This is Danielle L. Jensen's young adult series that was independently published and I believe it was her debut. This series was doing rounds before Bridge Kingdom, and I mean, now unfortunately not many people pay attention to it as opposed to the Bridge Kingdom series because for some reason Bridge Kingdom seems to be more loved over this series, and so many people go into this series expecting it to be the next Bridge Kingdom, but it's not because it is a young adult fantasy. But what I personally have to say about the Malediction trilogy is that it is a work of art. I believe I read the Malediction trilogy before I read the Bridge Kingdom series. That is probably the reason why it just never really tainted my view on the Malediction trilogy. I'm just personally so happy I read this series and I was able to separate this work from Danielle L. Jensen's newest work. This is one of my favorite series of all time, but I am getting rid of it because I have the hardbacks. They have the exact same covers. I don't really need these. If I had the shelf space, I'd probably keep them, but I also see this as an opportunity to pass the series on to someone else who might also appreciate it because I want more people talking about the series. It needs more hype. And the next book I plan to unhaul is These Feathered Flames by Alexandra Overy. You're gonna see a few Bookish Box special edition books in this unhaul today, and some of them have to do with the fact that the Bookish Box have confirmed that they are not proceeding with a sequel. I believe that the second book in this series is either out or it's coming out soon, but I had literally purchased this because I loved this art style and I wanted to continue on with the series in this art style. Yes, I know it was a cover buy and that's that, right? Unfortunately, the Bookish Box have confirmed they are not doing any sequels of this book. I'm getting rid of this edition. If I want to read the book series in the future, then I might listen to them on audio. I don't really have interest in collecting this series. I don't really know much about it. I literally just cover bought it and I know I feel guilt over that, but it is my wallet at the end of the day. My bad decisions I have to live with. And speaking of the Bookish Box, I'm getting rid of this book for a completely different reason. Even though I'm not actually too sure whether the Bookish Box will continue on with this series or not, I didn't have interest in this book series to begin with, but also every single time I look at this book edition on my shelf, I get angry, and I get angry personally because of the way that the Bookish Box team packed their monthly box that month, and they did it very poorly. Not just to the point that my saucer for my cup and saucer got broken, but also to the point that the book received some damage, but also I noticed that the page stenciling is not even aligned. I get mad about this edition every single time I look at it. The Princess Poison Bound, right? It's pretty. I didn't have interest in reading this one to begin with, to be honest. However, I think what makes it even worse is that is really disappointing. I don't know who quality checked that, but I mean, I'm not okay with that. And also, as a result of how the package was packed, it is massively dented there. So if I wanted to take the dust jacket off, I can't display that. It's shriveled. So far, unfortunately, I think this has been the most disappointed I've been in terms of how this wasn't quality checked to begin with, but also the package wasn't. And looking back at the honest and constructive unboxing I did when I unboxed the box that this book came in, it's really hard to look at this edition of the book without thinking about how upset I was when I was opening that package. And I was still trying to keep my cool. I am planning to get rid of this. Even the dust jacket is like wrinkled and whatnot. I'm not planning to read it anyway, but I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that that went past the quality check. I didn't even mention this in the video. I just thought that that was something I should be able to put up with, but no, I mean, that's not aligned. I've never received anything that's not aligned from Fairy Loot or Illumicrate. I would expect the Bookish Box to do better. And the next book I'm planning to unhaul today is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. I read this book a while ago and I did enjoy it, but I am not planning to hold on to it because I don't plan on rereading it anytime soon. It is a very pretty edition and I reckon that any book collector would be lucky to have it. I'm just planning to get rid of it because it's collecting dust. And speaking of books that are collecting dust, unfortunately the doll maker of Kroku has got to go. I think I'm going to pass this on to my cousin once again. It is middle grade and it seems like a very cute story. It's just unfortunately I have not been able to prioritize picking it up because it just doesn't seem like one of those books I would prioritize. However, it does look very magical and I literally cover bought this. It looks absolutely stunning and cute, but I personally reckon that it would benefit a younger reader more than it would benefit me. So I am planning to pass this on to my cousin. Another book I'm planning to pass on to my cousin is The Storm Runner by J.C. Cervantes. There's so many Rick Riordan Presents series that I really wanted to collect at first, but there's so many to keep up with. So I've just decided while I have the first book, I'm just going to nip it at the bud and just give this to my cousin. I'm pretty sure she might enjoy it considering that it is a middle grade fantasy. I am still planning on reading Rashoni Chokshi's Arusha and the End of Time series, but yeah, I hope that Sophie will love The Storm Runner. Also, this cover is absolutely stunning. I literally just could not resist it. And speaking of book series that I just really cannot be bothered with continuing and purchasing more books for, A Touch of Gold by Annie Sullivan. So I read this before I even knew that The Plated Prisoner existed, except this is a King Midas reimagining where I believe that it follows the daughter of King Midas, and I believe that she is also fully gold as well. And like, as much as the story was entertaining at the time, I reckon that I would really mix this up with The Plated Prisoner if I reattempted to read this series. I mean, once again, if I do change my mind, I might listen to it on audiobook because it is a duology, but yeah, right now it just seems too similar to another series I wanted to get to that also happens to be a King Midas reimagining, except this is YA and The Plated Prisoner is clearly new adult. The next book I plan to unhaul sounds very similar to It Ends With Us and The Build-Up Season. It's Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios. I feel like after reading It Ends With Us, I don't believe that I'm personally in the right position to seek out books about toxic relationships. And this is really difficult for me because I really wanted to read this book at some point, but after It Ends With Us, after reading it and after it hitting close to home, also being at the stage of my life that I am where I have recently left a toxic relationship, non-romantic, but still a relationship nonetheless, I'm personally not yet ready to seek out more stories with that representation. It is just a little bit too triggering for me at the moment and it hits close to home. So I am planning to give this to someone who would love that education. I am devastated because once again, I really wanted to read this. Also, the cover is stunning, but I don't think that that is enough reason for me to keep it. And if anything, I think I'm a lot more anxious about reading this than anything. And the next two books I'm planning to get rid of are the first two books in the Wayward Children series, Every Heart a Doorway and Down Among the Sticks and Bones. These hardbacks are so expensive to get in Australia. You pay $35 for a novella. How many books are out in this series already? There's like 7 or 8 or 9. I really don't know, and I don't know how long the series is going to go for. I just think to myself, if I ever want to read the series, I'll probably get them in like a bundled box set. It's probably going to be cheaper that way. But at the moment, I'm not interested in reading them. I was at some point, but I can't justify myself paying $35 per hardback in order to continue on with the series. I mean, I could get the paperbacks, but once again, as I mentioned, I'm not really interested in collecting the series at the moment. I'm just waiting for the series to be done for me to start collecting. I've been waiting for years for that to happen. It's just not happening. But maybe I might listen to them on audiobook eventually, once I am finally interested in the series again. The next book I'm planning to unhaul is actually an arc of Mirage by Sumaya Dao. So this is kind of one of those similar situations where the sequel came out like 2 years after the initial first book, or 2 or 3 years, I really don't remember, and I had lost interest. I mean, personally, I somewhat enjoyed Mirage and I liked its concept. However, I did feel like it was a very rushed book and it could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I also really like the look of this arc. It's so pretty, but unfortunately, the sequel also had a cover change, and that makes me feel a little bit sad because, I mean, the original cover was so beautiful to begin with, and I don't think that it would have been impossible to make a matching cover. The initial cover was beautiful. I'm not planning on rereading Mirage, but I am thankful to the publisher for giving it to me because I was so looking forward to this, and I did enjoy it at the time. It's just I've lost interest. And speaking of book series, I literally just cannot bother purchasing more books for. I have Dare Mighty Things by Heather Krasinski. I wanted to read this duology at some point, and you know what? I might want to read this duology at some point, but at the moment, once again, I am not interested, and I reckon that I would give it to someone who is very much heavily invested in YA. The harder thing about collecting more books in this series, though, though is that this book series only has US rights. So I can't go into a bookstore and purchase the sequel. I would need to purchase it online, and I would have to pay like a good amount of money in order to get the sequel in hardback, which is what I did for the first book. I don't know whether it is worth the investment or not at this point, considering that it's been a while and I'm just not really that interested anymore. Yes, another Bookish Box special edition where they are not continuing on the series like with the sequels and whatnot. Goldspan. I love how the Bookish Box customized this edition. It doesn't even feel like a Bookish Box edition. I'm going to try to describe this to those who don't receive Bookish Box editions. So I'm gonna grab this special edition of Stalking Jack the Ripper here. The hardback seems to have like a leather-like texture, but also the spines are square, and they also make this crack sound every single time you open them, and they have like thinner pages and whatnot. These are what are known as their luxe editions. And as much as, you know, their luxe editions are customized and they are different, I very much love the style of this hardback because it very much feels traditional. It feels like an Owl Crate special edition. There is no fault with this whatsoever. So pretty. Look at that foiling. But I'm getting rid of it because they are not doing the sequel in this cover style. And the original cover styles for the books in this series are completely opposite from the way that this looks. So how is this going to benefit me if I wanted to purchase the sequel in this style? I don't see the point in keeping this one, unfortunately. It is pretty, but I think I'm going to be handing it over to someone who doesn't mind their books not matching. And this kind of pains me to get rid of because I do like collecting all books in a series, but I am planning to get rid of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I just didn't like this prequel and I don't think that it's necessary. I am planning on watching the movie. I am hyped for the movie. I just don't see the point of keeping this book in my collection, but I also really like the cover. I think it's about time I say goodbye to it. And more books I'm planning to give to my cousin Sophie, the Seraphina series, books 1 to 3. These books are absolutely stunning, but they are middle grade and I don't see myself getting to them anytime soon. I'm just not motivated to pick them up as opposed to the dark fantasy or paranormal books or the adult romance that I have on my TBR. Yeah, you guys can definitely tell that my reading tastes have definitely skewed older with my age. I mean, with this series, I would say never, but it's just not something I'm going to get to anytime soon, and it's taking up a good amount of space. And these were really expensive, so I'm pretty sure my cousin Sophie will highly appreciate them. The next books I plan to get rid of are 2 poetry collections, both by Atticus. I went through a modern poetry phase. I don't know whether that phase has gone or not. I just haven't picked up a modern poetry book in a while. I still have a bunch of modern poetry on my TBR that Camilo actually encouraged me to keep because the books are small, but also he placed them in another part of our house where it's not taking up shelf space. So he's encouraged me to keep some poetry. However, with the Atticus poems, like, these look cool. I'm not very interested in the Atticus book. I did read Love Her Wild. I found it to be okay, but not really enough for me to want to read more from Atticus. So I'm planning to unhaul these. The next book I plan to unhaul is also a book from a subscription service, and I think I realized after getting this book that I don't know whether I plan on receiving books consistently from them going forward. I'm planning on unhauling Wolf God by Veronica Douglas. So this is by Fabled, and I had come to a personal realization. Whenever I receive a new book from Fabled, I'm not really getting much that is unique, really. I'm particularly a little bit disappointed in this one because I just find this cover to be okay. The pages aren't even properly aligned. That's meant to be a wolf. There's no head.
So no head?
Frustrates me. But also, if I wanted to take the dust jacket off to display something different, this and this clash. This isn't meant to be like a full-on critique video or anything, but I had come to the realization that I'm not really a fan of Fabled style, and the reason why I'm not is because Fabled do the same kind of style every month. They use the same graphic designer. When you really think about it, publishers don't even release books every month by the same graphic designer. Like, with some authors, yes, but it's not happening every month. There's still a full-on catalog to choose from, and I don't like how every month I'm getting a very similar design from Fabled. I ended up looking at the original cover, and I much prefer the original cover, and I realized that maybe going forward the same thing will happen again and again, where I feel like I actually just want either the original cover or I want Fabled to maybe branch out and hire more artists, because as much as these designs might be preferred by some consumers, I'm not a fan of them. I have decided that I'm suspending my Fabled Fabled subscription. I mean, some of their special editions look cool, but like, I'm not wowed about them considering that I kind of know what to expect when I'm paying $85 a month. They choose great books from great authors. I just don't end up liking the design at the end of the day. I gave Fabled or the Fabled family 2 chances, but at the end of the day, I think I just want them to hire more artists to kind of make their monthly books a bit more diverse. This style might be someone else's style. It's definitely not my kind of style.
And we have an update. So I went on Fabled's Instagram stories yesterday, and it looks like their March Fabled Twilight book will actually have a guest artist designing the book cover. Fingers crossed they release some concept art, or if not, they will announce the artist sometime soon. I skipped my February renewal. I looked at the original covers of the books and I just thought to myself, no, I'm not gonna risk it again. I'm skipping February. But I'm going to see whether or not I'm going to give March a chance. So technically my Fabled subscription is currently on hold. I've skipped one box and I can keep it on hold until, of course, they cancel it if I don't switch back to active subscriber. But at the moment, this is just my thought process when it comes to Fabled. I just don't want to see similar designs every month. And sometimes the designs kind of work. Like, for example, I believe there's an Amelia Hutchins book that's coming out, and that one definitely works. Wolf God is just one of those ones that makes me a little bit bitter, because when you compare it to the original cover, I don't know, it just makes me a little bit bitter, honestly. And I think that also comes down to how much I paid for it.
And the next book I plan to get rid of is The Infinity Courts by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I put this in my self-destructing TBR last year and I never ended up getting to it. I just have no motivation to get to it. Therefore, I'm not motivated to pick up the sequel, and I've just decided I'm going to pass this on to someone who would appreciate a hardback of this book. However, a book that was on my self-destructing TBR that I did end up getting to, but I'm not planning on rereading, is A Girl Like That. This book I did enjoy, but once again, I'm not planning on rereading it. So I am planning on passing it on, but it is very pretty and I'm a little bit sad about it. The next book I'm planning to get rid of is City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This was my second Fairy Loot adult pick that I received, and as much as the naked hardback is pretty and the end pages are pretty, those are like the only reasons why I actually like this edition. I don't like the lack of creativity when it came to the cover and the pages. Also, there are very mixed / negative reviews about this book. It's not really winning me over. I'm also unhauling it because I don't even think that the standard edition of the sequel will match the Fairy Loot edition, and Fairy Loot are probably going to be doing the sequel anyway, but I've just decided that I'm not going to be purchasing it because purchasing one single book from Fairy Loot is probably going to cost me like $100 Australian including shipping, so I'm just not going to bother. The next book I'm planning to unhaul is Hunted by the Sky. I just picked this up for its cover. I don't know, I'm not bothered to pick up the sequel. I don't know, I just purchased it on a whim at some point. I really have to stop doing that. I really have to start looking into series before reading them and working out whether or not I'm interested in them. I've gotten better with that over the years, but with like young adult duologies, I really have to be more careful. Speaking of young adult duologies, I have a companion duology here that I actually somewhat enjoyed. I love The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani Chokshi. However, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of A Crown of Wishes, and I'm wondering whether or not I should just split these and whether I should just keep The Star-Touched Queen, but I also have it on audiobook, so I might just listen to it on audiobook if I ever want to revisit it. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to make shelf space, so I did put these in the unhaul pile, but I love The Star-Touched Queen and would recommend it. This is probably my favorite full-length novel by Roshani Chokshi, but yeah, Crown of Wishes was a little bit disappointing for me, so I don't know how I feel yet, but definitely A Crown of Wishes has got to go. I'm still thinking about this one though. Lips Touch by Laini Taylor. This book I didn't love as much as anything else I've read by Laini Taylor. I found it quite disappointing actually, and I think it's because of how bite-sized it is compared to everything else that she's put out. But the thing about this edition is that it's out of print, so I kept it on my shelf purely because I can't find it in bookstores anymore, and I kept on thinking to myself, what if I wanted to reread it eventually? I have to stop thinking that way, and I have to get rid of books I actually didn't enjoy. So I'm getting rid of this edition of Lips Touch. I got it for $7 at a secondhand place, but I'm pretty sure someone else might appreciate this. Maybe they might just be a lover of Lips Touch and they just want an edition of it that is out of print. Again, with the book subscription box picks. This one in particular makes me a little bit bitter because I'm not necessarily interested in the book. I've actually watched a few reviews of this book and the problematic elements of it, so I ended up getting spoiled for it before the theme was announced. I didn't want to get this book, and I know some of you guys might be thinking, what G-Swizz, you could have skipped your box for the month. I really wanted the items so bad. With Fairy Loot, I collect the tarot cards. I did not want to miss out on collecting the 2 cards and also the other items. The other items in the box made the box kind of worth it, but unfortunately I could not separate the items from the book we received, and the book we received was The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mick. mix. I mean, this cover, absolutely pretty. This is the reverse dust jacket art, and I reckon that this is the best part of the customization. But I mean, this has got to be the ugliest ombre I have ever seen. I'm not only just not interested in this book, this ombre is terrible. So even if I was to get this box and have this book on my shelf for aesthetic reasons, even though I wasn't planning on reading it in the first place, I have a shelf full of stenciled edges and ombre pages and whatnot. This contributes nothing. This is disgusting. I honestly don't know what they were thinking when they thought to make an ombre like this, but it is a terrible ombre. I think that's the original cover. Yeah, it matches the original cover, but it's gross. I did not want this book on my shelves because I wasn't interested in reading it to begin with, but also now I just am not interested, period, because I can't even put it pages out. I guess I'm gonna hand this book over to someone who's actually interested in reading it. I'm just not interested at all, and I'm even more not interested in keeping it because this is a poor design choice, in my opinion. The next two books I'm planning to unhaul. One of them I'm tossing up as to whether or not I should keep it or not, but both of them are editions of the same book that I didn't end up enjoying. That, my friends, is Book of Night by Holly Black. So I ended up receiving the Bookish Box Special Edition around 2 or 3 months after receiving the Fairy Loot Exclusive Edition. And honestly, I wanted to unhaul this instantly. Whereas the Fairy Loot Edition, even though both of them have block sprayed edges and they're a little bit unoriginal, what I love about the Fairy Loot Edition is the way that it's designed underneath the dust jacket. I don't know if that can be topped. Like, that is just absolutely stunning, and maybe this book series will actually be better eventually. But yeah, the Bookish Box Special Edition wasn't amazing. I mean, the end pages just look a little bit generic, and that's pretty underwhelming compared to the Fairy Loot Exclusive Edition. I'm tossing up whether or not to keep the Fairy Loot Exclusive Edition or not, but I'm definitely getting rid of the Bookish Box one, 100%. This story just doesn't really interest me, and I have to think to myself, if they were to release a sequel, would I be excited to collect the next book? I really don't know. So I think I'm going to have to push myself to get rid of both editions of Book of Night. And this is attempt number 2 of unhauling the Caraval books. So I initially unhauled these. However, I had kept them in a bag for a very long time because I was still unsure as to whether or not I wanted to give it a second chance. And then when I heard that Once Upon a Broken Heart was a spin-off to Caraval, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to give this a second chance. I'm going to read these books. I did read these books, and what a mistake that was. I did not like Caraval the second time I read it. The first time I read it, I found it to be okay. The second time I read it, I cringed so hard. Legendary was okay, and Finale, it was too rushed. I mean, this entire series should have been told in the perspective of both sisters the entire time. The writing style is just really inconsistent. I am planning on reading Once Upon a Broken Heart. I'm hoping that the writing style is a bit more consistent there, considering that we are following one couple. I believe that there is also a love triangle in Once Upon a Broken Heart because I accidentally read the synopsis of the third book. I know. I don't remember too much of it though, so we will see. I cannot believe that actually giving a series a second chance was one of the biggest mistakes of 2022, but it was. This next duology I'm planning to get rid of was actually a really hard decision for me. And it was a really hard decision for me because I love this author, but I have to acknowledge that this duology has very problematic elements and that my favorite author made a couple of mistakes when writing the series. And they had acknowledged their mistakes, but at the very same time, they had also explained their side of the story, which did put me at ease. But whenever I look at this duology on my shelf, I kind of tense up. I can't bring myself to reread it. As much as I do want to revisit it, at least the first book sparked a few controversies, and that isn't necessarily completely the fault of the author. That was also the fault of the Bookstagram community. The Carve the Mark duology. I have to admit, I think I did enjoy this reading experience when I read it. However, it was really hard to separate all the criticism from it when I was reading it for the first time. Actually, I read Carve the Mark twice. I did enjoy Carve the Mark. It's just, I still cannot separate this book series from that controversy because Veronica unfortunately did write the series the way that she did. It just doesn't look right when the aggressor is a person of color and the protagonist in the savior role happens to be white. Veronica did make it clear that only the aggressors were POC, but not their entire people that they range over, and vice versa. This all being said, I mean, yes, that did make me feel somewhat more comfortable reading this series. However, there was also an element of self-harm in this series, and I think what made it even worse was when there was a bookstagrammer who kind of replicated this design on their arm, and that sparked a lot of controversy. So a lot of people can't look at this cover without feeling triggered. I love Divergent, I love Chosen Ones, I love Poster Girl, I love books from Veronica Roth. However, this book series I cannot separate from the controversies, and I do have my own criticisms for. I reckon that there were some writing choices that Veronica should have reviewed before submitting it to the publisher. It did blow up, and it did make publishers and authors kind of realize at the time how they should be be writing their fantasy novels and how they really do need to hire sensitivity readers, because this was a huge controversy. It made me sad personally because Veronica Roth had already been under fire for Allegiant. However, these needed to be looked over. These needed to have sensitivity readers. I am planning on unhauling these, and the next book I'm planning to unhaul is once again another book from the Bookish Box where they're not going to be doing a sequel. And that, my friends, is Defy the Night by Bridget Camerera. I love this cover. It was illustrated from one of my favorite illustrators, Gemlin C. But unfortunately, they're not doing the sequel with the same cover style. So I'm passing this on to someone else. I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to be unhauling this duology. I attempted to read the first book twice, and as much as it was a good, entertaining read, I cannot bring myself to read Our Violent Ends. I'm personally not motivated to continue on with the story. I am wanting to read more books by Chloe Gong. I know that they have a new series that they are planning on starting, and I think I'm going to read that series. However, I wasn't interested in these Violent Delights after going through it twice. It's an okay read. It just didn't have my attention the entire time, and I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more romantic, and it wasn't really that romantic for a Romeo and Juliet reimagining. I'm just not motivated to continue on, especially because I know what happens at the end. I think we all know what happens at the end. No disrespect to the author whatsoever, it's just I don't think that the series is for me. And the next book I'm planning to get rid of is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I just cover bought this, but I'm not interested in reading a murder mystery, so I'm going to get rid of it. Also, I heard that there's some fat phobia in here as well, so that has definitely also turned me off. I'm also going to get rid of this beautiful edition of Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller. I thought that Fabled would do the sequel, and I mean, I don't even like the first book that much, but I mean, this cover was absolutely stunning because it was illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, once again, Gemlin C. Absolutely pretty, but I mean, I'm not going to be reading Master of Iron, and I'm pretty sure Fabled aren't going to be doing a matching edition of Master of Iron either, so this one's going. I'm going to be getting rid of this duology, Want and Ruse. I enjoyed these at the time that I read them, but I don't think I'm going to be rereading them, and I'm probably going to hand these over to someone who wants these beautiful covers. This series was okay. Unfortunately, it didn't really stick with me, and I don't think I'm going to be revisiting it because I don't really have like nostalgic memories of it. And the final book that I am unhauling is a book that I told myself I was not going to unhaul because they are no longer doing editions of this first book that look like this. But at the very same time, I have to ask myself, am I actually interested in reading the series at some point? And the answer is no. I'm actually not interested in reading the Witchland series, and Truth Witch is the one that I am getting rid of. Truth Witch wasn't necessarily an amazing book. I mean, I read it, I liked Prince Merrick, I don't remember anything else about it. I know that the female friendship was prominent. I think what annoys me about the Truth Witch series or the Witchland series in general is that it's more like an anthology series where you're following different characters every book. But the thing is, I don't even feel like I got to know, I think it was Safi? I don't think that I got to know her properly in this first book, and I actually wanted to follow her and Prince Merrick for the rest of the series. But the entire series kind of goes into like different POVs. Don't get me started on the cover change. I think that the cover changes like kind of annoy me even more because this first cover is absolutely stunning, and I don't understand why the publisher would have wanted to change this cover. The other books, newer in the series, I reckon would have still suited this style. I really love this cover style, so I kept it on my shelves for I don't know how long. I think I read this at the time I was struggling with Bell's palsy. That was at the age of 20 or 21. That was the I was 20 then. For context, I'm 27 now. So it's been 6.5 years since I read this book. I'm not interested in continuing on with the series, unfortunately, and I know a lot of people have been encouraging me to. It's just the fact that I read this 6.5 years ago, and the series currently is only on book 4, and I don't know whether it finishes at book 5 or book 6, but the fact that it's taken that long to even complete the series, and so many people are dropping off at this point, I feel like I'm gonna drop off. I'm not interested at the moment. Look, maybe one day when the series is bingeable, maybe I will read them, but I wanted to keep this cover because it was so pretty and I wanted it forever in my possession. But when I really think about it, this isn't one of my favorite series, so why am I keeping this edition of it when I know that so many other people out there actually still appreciate the series and would actually do anything to get this cover? I'm just holding them back. But those were all 80 books I'm planning to give away to my friends, to my family, or donate. This unhaul was quite the effort to film, but it's honestly so good to know that I will be passing these on to loving living homes. I am happy and I'm proud of my clean out, and I am also very much pleased with the shelf space I now have. So I guess if you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the book stack emoji, and if for some odd reason you enjoyed this book haul today, book lovers, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already joined the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at gswizzlebooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at gswizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.